If you think my story is just about a woman losing her luxury cars, you are wrong. This is the exact moment I realized that if I didn't run, my children and I were going to leave that mansion in body bags. It was 2 a.m. on a freezing Thursday winter night. The electricity had been cut for 3 days because we had no money, and the house was pitch black. Mandla kicked the front door open, smelling of heavy alcohol and pure rage. Another one of his tender fraud bank accounts had just been frozen by the state. He was a cornered animal, looking for blood. My 6-year-old daughter, shaking from fear in the dark, accidentally knocked over a glass of juice near his designer shoes. I saw him raise his heavy hand, his face twisted like a demon, ready to strike a helpless 6-year-old child. In that split second, the rich aunt died, and the mother woke up. I threw my body over my little girl, taking a blow that sent me crashing into the marble floor. As I lay there bleeding, looking at my 2 terrified daughters crying in the dark, a cold truth washed over me. No Gucci bag is worth my life. No luxury estate is worth my children's sanity. That was the exact night I decided to take a gamble with death, pack one single suitcase, and step out into the dark. Hold your breath, because what happened next is the part of my story that nobody, not even my own family, saw coming. In my culture, they say sometimes love is cast like a spell. But what the elders never warn you about is that the most dangerous spells in this modern world are cast with money. They are cast with black credit cards, German sports cars, and housing deeds. If you see me today at a family wedding back home in the province, you would swear I am the happiest woman in South Africa. I am the last-born child in my family. By tradition, I should be the one washing the big black pots at the back of the yard with the other young girls. But when I walk into a family gathering, everything stops. My older brothers and sisters, people who changed my nappies, stand up to give me their seats. They call me Sisi, a deep title of respect, usually reserved only for the matriarchs. To my family, to my friends, and to everyone on Instagram, I am the ultimate rich aunt. I am the one who arrives in a car that purrs like a wildcat. I am the one with the 30-inch virgin hair frontals, the red-bottom heels that click loudly on the floor, the diamond-encrusted watches, and the luxury designer bags. When a family member passes away, they don't call the insurance first. They call me. When a cousin needs university registration fees, I am the bank. I loved it. I won't lie to you. That arena of showing off was my oxygen. But nobody knows that under my expensive, oversized Gucci sunglasses, I am hiding a deep, dark purple bruise. Nobody knows that the beautiful double-story house I sleep in is a high-security prison, and the man who put me there is slowly extracting my soul. Please, sit down with me today. Put on your headphones, listen to my journey, and tell me what you would have done if you found yourself trapped in the belly of a beast. Let me take you back 8 years ago. I was not always the rich aunt. I was just a simple girl from a humble village, trying to survive the harsh concrete jungle of Johannesburg. I had no university degree, no connections, and no safety net. My life was calculated in rands and cents, measured by how many plates of food I could carry on my arms without dropping them. I was a waitress at a very popular restaurant in the city. Every single day, my feet throbbed from standing for 12 hours. I lived in a cramped, shared room in Hillbrow, sending every spare cent back home to my mother so she could buy maize meal and paraffin. Then entered Mandla. Mandla was not just a customer. He was an event. Whenever he came into the restaurant, the atmosphere shifted. He was loud, charismatic, and exuded the kind of confidence that only comes from deep pockets. He usually arrived with a group of men in sharp suits, all of them laughing too loudly, dropping car keys onto the table with heavy thuds. Keys with badges that normal people only see in magazines. The first time I served his table, I was shaking. But Mandla looked at me and smiled. He didn't treat me like a servant. He treated me like a prize. When the bill came, he didn't even look at the total. He swiped his card and told me to keep the change. The tip he left me that night was more than my entire monthly basic salary. My hands were shaking so much I almost dropped the card machine. Within 3 weeks, Mandla was coming to the restaurant only when I was on shift. He would sit at my station, look at me with those intense, warm eyes, and tell me that a beautiful girl like me didn't belong in a uniform. I was charmed, blinded, and completely swept off my feet. He started taking me out to places I didn't even know existed, restaurants where they don't put prices on the menu. Within 4 months of dating, the unexpected happened. I fell pregnant. I remember sitting on the toilet floor of my shared flat, looking at those 2 pink lines on the stick and weeping. I thought my life was over. I thought he would do what many men in the city do, change his phone number, block me, and disappear into the shadows. When I finally gathered the courage to tell him over dinner, my voice was a tiny whisper. Mandla didn't blink. He reached across the table, grabbed both of my hands, and looked deeply into my eyes. "My queen," he said, his voice deep and steady. "Why are you crying? This is a blessing. Tomorrow, you are going to that restaurant. You are throwing that apron in the trash, and you are leaving that cheap flat. You are coming home to be my wife. I will take care of you and my child forever." It felt like a movie. It felt like God had looked at my family's generations of poverty and decided to rewrite our lineage in gold. Within months, his family came to my village for Lobola. The amount of money he paid made my uncles dizzy. He brought live cattle, expensive blankets, and premium whiskey. My mother wept tears of joy. Soon after, we had a massive, lavish, traditional wedding that was the talk of the district for months. I thought I had entered paradise. The transition was dizzying. I went from counting coins for a taxi to driving a brand new German SUV that smelled of expensive leather and luxury perfume. We moved into an ultra-exclusive estate, the kind of place where the security guards at the gate look like special forces operators, and you need a specialized biometric scan just to visit your neighbor. I gave birth to our first daughter, and 2 years later, our second. They were my absolute world. They grew up speaking perfect English, attending an elite private creche where the school fees for 1 term could buy a plot of land in the township. My social life changed entirely. I became the undisputed ringleader of my social circle. Women who used to ignore me now fought to sit next to me at high teas. I was the one who decided which champagne we drank, which luxury lodges we visited for weekend getaways, and what the dress code was for our birthdays. But it was my family dynamics that shifted the most, and that is where the poison truly began to brew. In many of our African spaces, respect is no longer chronological. It doesn't matter if you are the firstborn or the wisest. Respect is given to the one with the heaviest pockets. Because Mandla's money was funding everything, I became the absolute ruler of my family. My mother completely stopped making decisions without calling me first. If my older brother needed a loan to fix his roof, he had to go through my mother, who would then humbly ask me. "Please speak nicely to your sister," my mother would tell him. "She is the one holding up this family." Every December, when we drove down to the province for the holidays, it was my personal arena. I looked forward to it all year. I would pack my bags with the most expensive outfits, ensuring that every single day I wore something different, something loudly designer. I would buy out the entire local butchery, pay for the alcohol for the whole village, and hire professional caterers so my mother wouldn't have to lift a finger. I loved the whispers. I loved walking past the village elders and hearing them say, "Look at her. That is Mandla's wife. She lives like royalty in Johannesburg." But that pride erected a massive, freezing wall between my siblings and me. They stopped looking at me as their little sister, the baby of the house. They began looking at me with deep resentment and jealousy. Whenever I tried to give advice, it was met with cold, silent stares. They felt I was using my husband's wealth to lord over them, to make them feel small. They didn't see me anymore. They only saw a walking ATM. I convinced myself that I didn't care. I thought to myself, let them hate, as long as they respect my money. I didn't realize that by cutting off my siblings, I was dismantling the only real safety net I had in this world. You know what they say about fast money? It arrives like a flash flood, but when it leaves, it takes the very foundation of your house with it. About 4 years into our marriage, the golden paint began to peel, revealing a terrifying reality. I had never really questioned where Mandla's immense wealth came from. Whenever I asked about his business, he would wave his hand dismissively, look at me with a cold sharpness, and say, "My choice in life was to marry a beautiful woman so she could enjoy life, not worry about men's business. Just spend the money and take care of the kids." I was too comfortable to push back. I chose blindness over the truth. But the truth has a way of breaking down doors. It started with the late-night phone calls. Mandla would pace up and down the marble hallways at 2 a.m., his voice pitched in a frantic, angry whisper. Then came the newspapers. One morning, I woke up, opened my phone, and saw my husband's face plastered across a major investigative journalism website. The headline sent a wave of ice through my veins. He was being investigated for massive multi-million rand government tender fraud. He had allegedly taken a massive contract to build a specialized hospital wing and schools in an impoverished community. The money had been paid out fully into his companies, but the buildings were nothing more than empty, rusted iron foundations. The millions had been spent right here, on our lifestyle, our mansion, my bags, and our luxury cars. When I confronted him, crying, holding the phone in his face, he snapped. That was the first time I saw the true monster behind the charming tycoon. He grabbed my arm so hard it left a mark, shoved me against the wall, and roared, "Do you think the lifestyle you live falls from the sky? If you want this luxury, you shut your mouth and you ride the storm with me." From that day, our home became a war zone. The Special Investigating Unit and the Asset Forfeiture Unit moved in like vultures. One horrific Tuesday morning, while my daughters were eating breakfast before school, a convoy of police vehicles breached our estate. They walked into my home with heavy boots and court orders. They towed away our luxury sports cars. They seized our bank accounts. They took the artwork off the walls. I had to stand there in front of my weeping children, watching the life I had built get stripped away piece by piece. Mandla didn't go to jail immediately, but he had to hire the most expensive senior advocates in the country just to stay out of an orange jumpsuit. Every single cent we had left went into paying those legal sharks. The financial pressure completely broke Mandla's mind. He turned his rage directly on me. The insults were daily, heavy, and venomous. "You are nothing but a glorified waitress," he would scream, his face inches from mine, spitting with anger. "I took you out of the gutter. You brought nothing to this marriage but your poverty, and now you want to judge me?" The psychological abuse quickly turned physical. The first time he struck me across the face, I flew across the room and smashed into the kitchen island. My daughters were standing right there at the kitchen door. They saw their father turn into a beast. They saw their mother bleeding on the floor. Their screams still echo in my nightmares every single night. Mandla began disappearing for weeks at a time, turning off his phone, leaving us completely abandoned. He would leave no money for food, no money for electricity. I, the great rich aunt, found myself sitting in a multi-million rand mansion with no electricity, counting coins just to buy a loaf of bread and a liter of milk for my children. And while he was gone, the real danger came knocking. Because the tender money had vanished, Mandla had borrowed heavily from dangerous loan sharks and political underworld figures to maintain appearances. At night, heavy, dark SUVs would park outside my gate. Men with cold eyes and visible firearms would ring the intercom, demanding that I open the gate, shouting that they wanted their millions from my husband, or they would take it out of our blood. I would sit on the floor of the main bedroom, clutching my 2 daughters in the pitch black, weeping silently, praying to God that they wouldn't climb over the wall and end our lives. I was living in a golden hell. I knew I had to leave. My soul was screaming at me to pack whatever clothes I had left and run for my life, but I was completely paralyzed. I was a prisoner, not just of Mandla, but of my own pride. I was terrified of what people would say. How could I face my friends? I was their ringleader. I was the standard of success they all measured themselves against. If I packed up and left, I would become the joke of the town. I would go from being the envy of social media to a broke, discarded, divorced single mother. And how could I face my family? They still saw me as the provider, the rock, the golden goose. For years, I had allowed them to treat me like a queen, and I had looked down on my older siblings because of my husband's wealth. How could I now pack up my children, walk back into my mother's humble village yard, and admit that the rich aunt had absolutely nothing? How could I look at my brothers and sisters whom I had humiliated with my arrogance and ask them for a plate of food and a corner to sleep in? I had no higher education. The only line on my CV was waitressing from nearly 8 years ago. In this brutal economy, who would hire an uneducated woman with a huge gap in her work history and 2 young children to feed? How would I pay for their private school fees? How would I buy them clothes? We had hidden the rot in our marriage so perfectly that if I told anyone the truth, they wouldn't believe me. If I called a friend crying, they would say, "Oh, please, you're just having a small marital dispute. Go back to your mansion and enjoy your wealth." Nobody could see my bleeding heart because the gold on the outside was too bright. I was caught in a deadly trap. I was either going to stay in that house and let my husband eventually kill me to protect his secrets, or I was going to leave and face the absolute humiliation of public poverty and family scorn. I felt like a ghost walking in a living body. I looked at the mirror one night after Mandla had pushed me down the stairs, and I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. Her eyes were dead. But let me tell you something about the spirit of a mother. A woman can endure a lot of pain for herself. She can sleep in tears, she can hide her bruises, she can swallow her pride. But the moment the fire begins to threaten her children, something inside her wakes up. The turning point came on a cold Thursday evening. Mandla had returned from a 2-week bender, furious because Accord had just frozen another one of his shell company accounts. He walked into the house like a tornado, screaming, throwing things. When my oldest daughter, who was just 6 years old, accidentally dropped a glass of juice near his shoes, he raised his hand to strike her. In that split second, something snapped inside my DNA. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I threw my body over my daughter, taking the heavy blow to my shoulder. As I lay on the floor, holding my child, I looked up at Mandla. For the first time in years, I didn't look at him with fear. I looked at him with absolute disgust. I realized right then that if I stayed in this house for my pride, my daughters would grow up believing that women are meant to be punched and broken. They would grow up thinking that money justifies violence. I looked at my blood on the floor and realized that no amount of designer leather or estate security was worth the lives of my children. That very night, while Mandla passed out into a heavy alcohol-induced sleep, I made my move. I didn't pack the luxury bags. They were bought with blood and stolen government money anyway. I packed 1 small suitcase for myself and 2 small backpacks for my daughters. I took their birth certificates, my ID, and the small amount of cash I had managed to secretly save by cutting back on groceries over the months. I unlocked the heavy kitchen door, gripped my daughter's small hands in the dark, and walked out of that multi-million rand prison. We walked the estate gate in the freezing night air. The security guards looked at me in shock as the great rich aunt hailed a basic e-hailing taxi at 3 o'clock in the morning. I didn't go to my friends. I knew they would just judge me or tweet about my downfall. Instead, I swallowed every single ounce of my pride, took a deep breath, and instructed the taxi driver to take me to the one place I feared going the most, my mother's house. When the taxi pulled up outside my mother's modest yard in the early hours of the morning, my knees were shaking. I got out, carrying my kids, and knocked on the door. When my mother opened it, seeing her last-born child shivering, bruised, and carrying nothing but a small bag, she didn't ask any questions. She just opened her arms, pulled us inside, and held me as I wept for 3 solid hours. The next morning, my older siblings arrived. I sat on a thin mattress on the floor, looking down at my feet, ready for the mockery. I told them everything. I told them about the tender fraud, the asset seizures, the beatings, the loan sharks, and the absolute terror I had been living in. I braced myself for them to say, "We told you so." I braced myself for them to laugh at my sudden poverty. But African families will surprise you. My oldest brother stood up, walked over to me, and placed his heavy hand on my shoulder. "My sister," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We hated your arrogance, and we hated the money that stole our little sister away from us. But we love you. You are our blood. This is your home. No man will ever lay a hand on you while we are alive." For the first time in 8 years, I felt completely safe. I didn't need high-security biometrics. I had the protection of my family. The months that followed were not easy, but they were the most beautiful months of my life. Mandla's world completely collapsed. Within 6 months of my escape, the state finally finalized its case against him. He was arrested on national television for tender fraud and corruption. His assets were liquidated. The mansion was sold at an auction, and he is currently serving a lengthy sentence in a maximum security prison. He tried to call me from inside, begging me to come back, but I blocked his legal team completely. I had to rebuild my life from the absolute ash. I had no degrees, but I had a working spirit. I went back to the hospitality industry, but this time, not just as a waitress. With the help of my brother, who helped me look after the kids, I enrolled in a part-time evening diploma course in hospitality management. Because of my years of observing how high-end restaurants operated when I was living the luxury life, I had unique insights. Within a year, a major boutique hotel group in Johannesburg hired me as an assistant floor manager. Today, I am the head manager of a beautiful estate restaurant. I don't drive a German sports car anymore. I drive a modest, reliable hatchback that I bought with my own legally earned salary. I don't live in a multi-million rand mansion. I rent a beautiful, sun-drenched, 2-bedroom apartment in a safe suburb. It is smaller, but there is no screaming in this house. There is no blood on the kitchen counter. There are no loan sharks ringing the intercom at midnight. There is only the sound of my daughters laughing, playing, and thriving in a school that I pay for with my own hard-working hands. My relationship with my siblings has completely healed. I am no longer their boss or their rich aunt. I am just their little sister again. We sit around the fire, we laugh, we share real love, not the love that is bought with stolen money. To every woman watching this video today, if you are sitting in a golden cage, if you are enduring blows and insults because you are terrified of losing the lifestyle, or because you are scared of what your family and friends will say on social media, hear me clearly. Your life is worth more than a designer bag. Your peace of mind cannot be bought at a luxury mall. Shame does not kill you. It builds your character. But staying in a toxic space will eventually take your life. Dust yourself off. Look at your children. Trust the strength inside your bones. And take that leap of faith. Thank you so much for walking this long journey with me today. Please leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think of my journey. And if you have ever had to choose between your pride and your peace, tell me how you survived. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story of survival and triumph. Until next time, goodbye.